and I have the honor of serving tonight as the moderator for this important conversation. Columbus City Council has come together today with community leaders to talk about violence impacting our city. Many tuning in have seen the recent headlines about gun violence or may have felt less safe in their neighborhoods. This uptick in shootings and violence is happening in cities all across America. And there are many different reasons. The COVID recession, the widespread stress weighing on our mental health, lack of trust in institutions of law and others, and prevalence of guns due to weak safety laws all play a casual role in the spike that we're seeing. Today, we hope to have an honest conversation about what's going on in our neighborhoods. Councilmember Mitch Brown and Councilmember Emmanuel Remy will speak with Deputy Chief Tim Becker about what Columbus Division of Police is seeing and hearing about this rise in violence. Then we'll hear from President Pro Tem Elizabeth Brown, Health Chair Priscilla Tyson, Marion Stuckey from the CARE Coalition, and Pastor Julius Lancaster, who will talk about community health, trauma, and engaging the city's youth. We'll then transition to a conversation about what this violence looks like from our neighborhood, from a neighborhood perspective. We'll be hearing from Neighborhoods Chair Rob Dorns, Mid-East Area Commission Leader Ms. Kay Barnes, and Neighborhood Violent Intervention Specialist Sean Stevenson. We'll finally wrap up with Councilmember Shayla Favor and Judge Elizabeth Gill talking about how the judiciary is working to keep our children, our community safe, our kids safe. But to start us off this evening, we're going to hear from Ms. Hooks. Ms. Hook, too often we brush past these pain and the loss that every single death causes. Unfortunately, Ms. Hook has experienced this pain personally. Her son, Pernell, was claimed by gun violence just last month. He was only 17. I want to welcome Ms. Hook to this town hall and express my deep appreciation on behalf of my colleagues and the community for sharing with us in such a raw moment. I got a chance to speak with Ms. Hooks again last week, and I was really moved by her strength, by her family's story, and her willingness to share in the hopes of keeping other young people safe and stopping other mothers from having to go through the pain that she is experiencing. So I'm going to welcome Ms. Hook to tonight's town hall and start off by asking Ms. Hooks if she could just tell us about Pernell and about the kind of young man he was. Ms. Danielle?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello.
Welcome.
Well, as y'all know, he was only 17. He would have been a senior at Linda McKinley. He has 7 other siblings. He's the oldest of 8. Um, Pernell was a really good kid. He went outside, but he didn't go much. He doesn't travel the streets. He doesn't stay out late. Um, he's really done nothing but play basketball or the game and go to school all his life. He's one of my very quiet children, so you will forget that he's even in your presence. Like that's how quiet he was. Um, he was a really good kid. It's just, and it's heartbreaking that someone would take an innocent life like the way they took his.
You told me he liked to play basketball. I asked you, was he any good?
Yeah, he was good. He was good. He um he was going to try out this year for Linden, but then the COVID has started. So we were doing on our way to doing college applications, and he wanted to play for Ohio State.
Yeah.
So it's I'm sorry guys, it's kind of hard.
No, it's extremely hard. And again,
Mhm.
take your time we appreciate you. I'm telling your story. How is your family doing? How are you guys holding up?
Yeah, we're holding up as strong as possible. um, is I'm trying to find the right words. It's of mm, his younger siblings, they don't even want to be upstairs by his room. So it's like this man who took something so special from us, he really doesn't know what he did to our family. Like, my kids don't even want to be at this house. And it didn't even happen at this house. And they still don't want to be here because they ask me every day, Mom, where's Pernell? Where's Pernell? And they've been to the funeral, like, and I can't stress to them enough that he's not coming back. So it's really heartbreaking. Um, because his 2-year old sister, she yells his name all day. And we have to tell her, like, Pernell's not here. Um, and then she'll say why. And it's really hard to find the words to tell her why her brother's not coming back.
So, is there anything you would want to say to the community just about the violence that's happening?
They just put the guns down. Put the guns down. They don't know how much y'all are tearing these families apart. Y'all put the guns down. That's all I can say is just
Yes, ma'am.
put.
On behalf of not this council, but on behalf of this community, we're just grateful for your bravery, for telling your story, for your strength. We pray that God grants you the grace and the peace, and know that we as a community see this as our loss and our responsibility to find solutions. And that's what this evening is about. And I just appreciate you taking the time and the willingness to be with us this evening. Thank you, and
Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.
The truly heartbreaking thing is to think that there have been 90 some other murders in our city this year, which means that there are 90 some other mothers and family members who are dealing with this type of pain. Um, with that weighing on us, I want to turn to Public Safety Chair Mitch Brown, to our Deputy Chief Tim Becker, and to Councilmember Remy, who will lead us in a conversation around specific public safety, what our police officers are seeing and hearing. And with that, Chair Brown, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President. Can you hear me? Am I coming through?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This year, our community has seen a significant increase in violence. It is not only the number of shootings, the homicides, and the violent crimes that are so concerning, but the age of the victims and perpetrators in these cases. Children as young as 12 are gaining access to guns and making choices that leave another person in our community gravely wounded or worse, as we've just heard. I believe our youth are overwhelmed by the many challenges we are facing in this moment. A pandemic that has emptied our schools, canceled extracurricular activities, an economic crisis that has diminished opportunities, and a number of national incidents of police misconduct that have undermined trust in law enforcement. These factors have led to a perfect storm, which our young people are attempting to navigate through. While we will not solve this overnight, I believe we must collectively start to address the issues facing our youth. It will take family, positive community role models, clergy, and educators to meet our youth where they are and direct them down a better path. We cannot police our way out of this situation, but police must play a role in the solution. I continue to believe and support the Columbus Division of Police. It is vital that we address the accessibility of guns in our communities. We must also seek to bring the perpetrators of the violence into custody to prevent further acts of violence. Now more than ever, we need a partnership between the police officers and the community members. I urge residents to approach the officers that patrol their community with questions and information. I believe ride-alongs are beneficial not only to community members interested in how the police operate in their neighborhoods, but for the officers to learn from the residents about the communities they are protecting and serving. We cannot let the crisis we face continue to divide us when the consequences are so important. Our community safety is all our responsibilities. With that, I'd like to introduce Deputy Chief Tim Becker to share some information regarding how the Division of Police is working to not only address violent crime, but working to prevent it within our community. Chief Becker?
Thank you, Safety Chair Brown, Council President Hardin, council members. First of all, I'd like to express my condolences to Mrs. Hook and say thank you for sharing this powerful story.
Thank you.
Homicides in our city certainly are more than numbers to me. You may have heard me say that before. I really appreciate those who have the strength to share their stories, recognizing that the pain is too great for some others to even speak out. In 2015 and 16, most major cities saw dramatic increases in violent crime. This was often labeled as the Ferguson effect. It's a societal condition where there's distrust and hostility towards police, and which in turn leads to less proactive policing, in turn leads to an increase in violent crimes. We did not have that happen here in Columbus. We were one of the few major cities that did not have that happen. It wasn't by accident. It was through great efforts of all our city leaders. In the division, we deployed many resources to our most vulnerable neighborhoods to reduce violence, improve relationships, and stop the violence by focusing our efforts on the most violent offenders. We not only listened to our neighborhood concerns, but we adjusted our tactics, something that we have done each of the 32 summers that I've worked for the Division of Police. Indicators show this had worked. Not only were our numbers decreasing, but our solve rate increased. We also invested in expanding the gun crimes unit over the last several years. The gun crimes unit processes arrests by uniformed officers for gun and low-level felony arrests. Some believe that the police shouldn't criminalize low-level drug offenses, but evidence indicates there are three main drivers of violence that I will refer to as the 3 Ds. Drugs, disrespect, and domestic violence account for an overwhelmingly high percentage of our shootings. It's not uncommon in our city for a homicide to occur for $20 worth of weed. Regardless of the underlying causes, illegal gun use is responsible for our criminal shootings, and I advocate for strict enforcement of illegal gun offenses. I view our gun unit as our first line of defense to try to change the behavior of the mostly young men carrying guns, but the young men and women carrying guns, and a chance to change their behavior before they start pulling the trigger. We want to intervene before the gun is used. Last year, the gun crimes unit processed 1,228 arrests between January 1st and August 31st. This year, the number is down to 781. In the same period of 2019, the division submitted 1,794 firearms to our property room. This year, the number is 1,737. To date, in 2020, 755 people have been victims of felonious gun violence. Mr. Hook and 82 others did not survive. To date, only 49% of those cases have been cleared, mostly due to lack of cooperation from witnesses. In the last few days, our city had a 5-year-old, a 9-year-old, and even a prominent athlete shot. In all these cases, there's either been little cooperation with the investigators, an expressed desire not to prosecute, or both. As someone who was born and raised in this city, It breaks my heart to see this violence. Risk manager and attorney Gordon Graham often says predictable is preventable. Sadly, the death of Mr. Hook falls in that category. His case is solved. Court records denote 9 entries for the perpetrator's name in the last 4 years before the murder. These entries are for low-level had his sentences either changed his behavior or kept him off the streets, Mr. Hook may still be here today. Hopefully, our collective actions bring forth meaningful change that can address the violent tendencies that are plaguing our community. Nobody should fear a cookout in a park, putting their child to bed at night, or walking down a street in broad daylight. Thank you for your time.
Sorry, Councilmember. We're on mute now. There you go. You're good. You're good, Councilmember. Go ahead.
I'm up.
Yep.
I said, before I address some questions, I would like to ask Councilman Remy for some comments.
Let's get myself unmuted here. Thank you so much, Councilmember Brown and Chair Brown and Deputy Chief Becker. Before I begin, I really want to thank and show my appreciation to Ms. Hook for being with us this evening and for sharing your story. I sincerely appreciate you, and my heart and prayers are with you and your family. There are a few things I want to touch on this afternoon as it relates to gun violence and just reimagining safety in general. When I think about the future of this department and within the city of Columbus, I envision new and increased collaborations between Columbus police, community groups, nonprofits, businesses, and local residents. It's important that we open up these lines of communications so that we're all working collaboratively together to make sure that we're protecting our community. It takes all of us to get involved and to be a part of the process in order to drive this violence out of our great city. One of the many great things about Columbus is that we are saturated with community support organizations and groups that want to collaborate. It's a disservice for our community if they are not empowered to use their voices and maintain open lines of communications with those charged with serving and protecting us. We also see challenges when police across the country engage those living with mental health conditions and leading some police departments to require increased empathy training. So in this vein, I think it's important that police allocate resources so that we are better prepared to interact with those living with mental health conditions. I also think that a community is best served by those who actually live within the community they serve. And so we know the vast majority of our officers do not live within the community in which they are charged to protect and serve. Although legally we cannot require them to do so, it's important we work on ways to encourage them to become proud residents of the city of Columbus. As chair of civil service and the administration committees for the city of Columbus, I think it's critical that we work to prioritize the hiring and incentivizing of officers who are our neighbors and reside amongst us. It's also important that we encourage and possibly incentivize our current officers to live within our great city. Lastly, I've heard sentiments from a few folks that think a few bad apples is a reflection of our entire force. However, we do in fact have outstanding officers on our police force, the vast majority of them. I continue to meet with our patrol officers, our police leadership, and listen to their experiences and stories, many of which have suggestions of their own on improvements to our police force, so that we can help to work towards ending this violence once and for all in the city. For those that have knowledge of bad actors, we need to make sure that they are empowered to protect. These officers are empowered to report those bad actors within the force. Bad actors simply won't be tolerated within our police department. So with that, I'll turn it back to Chair Brown and we'll continue the discussion. Thank you.
it is important to note that we even have an incentive program that we offered last year for individuals in our police division and our fire division to reside in the city, of which a number of individuals so far have begun to take advantage of that to provide you with that information. I have a few questions that were proposed to me that I'd like to have the chief at least take a look, address to some degree. One, what efforts are underway to confiscate illegal firearms before they're used to commit violent crimes?
Thank you. Again, we have our summer safety initiative. We've had some type of initiative all 32 years I've been here. This year, it's our Safe Streets initiative. We put a lot of officers out on bikes. We focus on the most violent criminals, and we look for gun crimes. We have our gun crimes unit, which specifically processes those arrests. We have analysts that try to link those together. We're changing our crime strategy policy to focus on violent crimes versus more property crimes that have been done historically. And our criminal investigations unit, often referred to as the gang unit, is taking a lead this year on our gun crimes.
Chief, also, for everyone's edification, when an investigation is deemed a cold case, how are cold cases investigated?
That's a great question. One I had myself a few years ago when I got this current assignment. We do have a cold case homicide unit that looks back at our cold cases, and I've enacted change over the last 3 years, dramatic change that we're still in the process of. Eventually, when we get there, we're working towards, after 12 months of a case not being solved from the date of incident, a group, two or more supervisors will review the case. They'll look at solvability factors. It'll be reassigned to a cold case detective with a fresh set of eyes. We think it's really important that we have that fresh set of eyes that maybe catches something the original lead detective didn't get, or to keep cases from piling up on the lead detective's desk. National studies have shown it's ideal for homicide investigators to have no more than 6 cases that they're primary on, and in some cases we were far above that in the past. There are more than 1,000 cold cases in the city of Columbus. That's a lot of unsolved crimes. If you have information about any of those, we would love you to come forward with that. As you recently saw, we solved a 38-year-old case involving a young girl that was kidnapped, sexually assaulted, killed, and dropped in another county. And we don't ever give up. It may be a year old, it may be 38 years old. If we get new information, we're going to follow up to the best of our ability.
And if a resident is aware of a particular cold case, what should they do about contacting the CPD?
Again, there's any violent crime, I would encourage that you submit tips. If you want to do so anonymously, you can do so through Crime Stoppers at stopcrime.org or 614-461-8477. The homicide unit phone number is 614-645-4730. And the felony assault unit is 614-645-4141.
Chief Becker, also one of the issues, what should residents do when they hear gunshots or gunfire in their respective neighborhood that's close by?
The first thing they should do is seek cover and get out of harm's way. Second thing, call 911. A lot of times, we recently had a shooting in a park this week with a considerable number of gunshots, and we received no calls on it. We only knew about it through our shot spotter gun detection. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't even know, and even though there was more than 50 shots fired. So call 911. If you're once you're in that safe spot, look around, see what details you can find, share that with the dispatcher. The more details that you have, the more likely we are to locate and be able to prosecute the offender.
Chief Becker, you brought up ShotSpotter. Would you explain ShotSpotter and how it's deployed and why it's deployed in certain areas?
Yes, sir. ShotSpotter is a technological solution that the city has looked into to address and invested in to reduce violent crime, and we appreciate that. It's basically a system that through audio or audio microphones detects gunshots. And when the microphones detect gunshots, experts at the company immediately review and verify that they're gunshots. And then they notify the Columbus Police radio room of the gunshots. And we, in turn, dispatch cars to those locations. The locations which they're in order to have microphones throughout the neighborhood, that's an expensive process. And we have a large city, so the whole city isn't covered. But the neighborhoods where we have them are the neighborhoods that have experienced historically the most gun violence. And so that's where they're deployed. We'd always love to, and we've had council support in the past to expand that program. Hopefully we'll be able to continue. It's proven very valuable so far.
And Chief, a real important question. What can parents do to keep their children safe when they have firearms in the home?
Yeah, this is really pertinent. Just this week, we had a mother who was a legal and licensed concealed carry permit holder who had a firearm, came home, thought she was unloading the gun by pulling back the slide on a semi-automatic pistol and taking the round out of the chamber. And then she took the magazine out of the gun and she put it under her bed while she went to get her kids to bed. One of the kids, as all us parents know, kids don't always act as we're expecting. And she got distracted. One of the kids got access to the gun because she had unloaded it in the reverse order of what you need to do to unload it. When you pull back the slide, it ejects the round, but it automatically puts the next round in the chamber if you don't take the magazine out first. And tragically, the child pulled the trigger and that one round in the magazine struck the other child. Fortunately, the child's going to survive. But just imagine how horrific that would be to happen if you have a weapon to protect yourself and your own child would use that and harm another child in your house. So I'd encourage always properly unloading the weapon and having it locked. Again, any parent can tell you kids get places we'd never imagine that they would get. And if they're not locked and secured, then they can be at risk to your own house.
Again, Chief, to reiterate the importance of having gun locks or a gun safe when you have a weapon in the household.
Absolutely. And, I have to have weapons in my house because of my employment. And so as a parent, I've also taken efforts to educate my kids. From a young age, we didn't have toy guns in the house because I didn't want them to be confused. But they saw what happens when a real gun shoots, whether it was through a water jug with red food coloring to demonstrate this is the blood that would leak out of somebody's body. And when that milk jug's empty, the life would be gone from a body. These are serious. These do a lot of damage. It's not a toy to play with. It's not one to show your friends when they come over. Your friends may ask. Try to have those hard conversations up front about the dangers of guns and the power of guns if you're a gun owner. So kids are generally curious, and we don't want that curiosity to lead to something tragic.
Last question from me, Chief. And again, just to reiterate the importance of gun locks. If you buy a weapon, you should also buy a gun safe and or a locking mechanism so the weapon is secure. How can residents assist the Division of Police with preventing and solving some violent crimes that we see happening in our communities?
The easiest way is if you see something, say something. Very few crimes happen in our city that had no witnesses. Just recently, we had a pregnant mother get shot and her fetus was killed in broad daylight. I was back out there less than a day later in our neighborhood, and the volume of cars driving by was tremendous. That shooting did not happen without a lot of witnesses, but nobody's coming forward. If you see something, say something. Just like Miss Hook, there's a lot of parents out there who can't understand why their loved one is gone. Don't do it for the police. Do it for our victims' families.
Thank you, Chief Becker. Chief Councilman Remy, do you have anything else you wish to add, sir?
Sure. Deputy Chief, I am just wanting to know what you've seen as far as an increase in gun activity since COVID started. I mean, obviously our numbers are up significantly, but would you attribute it more to the fact that people are stuck in their homes? Would you say there's any correlation between COVID-19 and what we're seeing?
A lot of us have anecdotal speculation. I don't have empirical or qualitative research. I've been looking. It's just so new. I would love to have a research partner examine that. We all personally have probably experienced some frustrations, mental anxiety due to COVID. Kids are not in school where they often have great role models. Our teachers, our coaches, they have distractions of sports. A lot of parents are struggling to get by, may have employment issues. It's such a complex equation, but it seems crazy to believe that it's not impacting the violence.
When we run across the victims of gun violence and the families that are experiencing this, like Miss Hook, who do we recommend them to go to for support services? What's out there for those types of victims?
So we've been trying to partner. The CARE Coalition in Columbus is a wonderful organization. They have limited resources, but I try to work very hard with Marion. I think she's going to be a speaker later. I have the utmost respect for her, and the more I know her, the more I love what she does. We notify her, the Violent Crime Review Group, for all that the mayor enacted a few years ago for all homicides that happen in Linden, the Hilltop, or the Southeast side. There's all the city departments are notified and do follow-up activities. And there's and the name's slipping me right from my name right now. I think it's Columbus Remembers. There's support groups, parents of murdered children, been to their vigils, so many powerful stories there. It just breaks your heart. But I think there's strength through talking to others that have lived through the same experience, and I would encourage any of those options to our victims' families.
I'm really running over on time here, but I just wanted to, I know the importance of ShotSpotter. It's the problem with asking residents to call, and they should call, but my neighbor and myself could hear a gunshot and we could think it's coming in from an entirely different direction. So the ShotSpotter technology is really impressive. What's been the return on investment? I know we've got to do more. How many guns have been removed, assailants apprehended because of ShotSpotter? If you
Unfortunately, I don't have that exact data with me. As I said the other day, there was 2 victims shot in the park the other day, including the child at the cookout. Nobody called the police. They went to the hospital directly. We recover evidence by getting to the crime scene, and we would not have known about it maybe ever, or at least not for a while, had not it been for ShotSpotter. So that evidence is going to continue to grow and build and help our city solve this violence problem. Unfortunately, I just don't have that exact data with me at the moment.
It's fair. Thank you, Chief. Chief, appreciate it. Thank you for all that you do. Council President Hardin, back to you.
Can I ask a question? I'm going to ask a question. Can I get a statement?
Sure, Councilmember.
So this just kind of goes with what I think, I'm sorry, but a question I think that Councilmember Remy asked, and Deputy Becker said he hadn't heard a lot of information. I just wanted to share that there was some data out here that I have seen, and it is, and there's it's called Operation Legend. It's in a number of major cities across the country in regards to the issue of violent crime. And they definitely said that social isolation, the disease, the stress of the disease, that COVID certainly is in high risk in particular neighborhoods. The economic devastation has created an explosion in cities across the country. And I think those are the same things that we are certainly seeing within our city. And there was also a statement is that as the weather begins to get colder, that there will continue to be that explosion. So there is data. It's called Operation Legend. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you. Councilmember Brown, did you have any Mitch Brown, anything closing?
Councilmember Tyson to speak to the issue with regards to the acknowledgement that gun violence is a public health crisis.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you, Councilmember Brown. With that, I'm going to transition to that next segment, which is on this topic in particular. We're going to hear now about the community's health and how to engage our young folks. I'd like to welcome President Pro Tem Elizabeth Brown and Councilmember Priscilla Tyson, as well as Marion Stuckey with the CARE Coalition, who Chief Becker just spoke about, and Pastor Julius Lancaster to share multi-generational insights on our neighbors. I'm going to turn it over to President Pro Tem.
Thank you, President Hardin. I just want to quickly say thank you to Ms. Hook. It's really not easy to share publicly the pain that you feel ever, but particularly this kind of pain, which you should never have had to experience, nor your other children. I really want to thank you, and I'm a mother as well. Every person on this call, whether they're a parent, has loved a child and has seen that child grow, and we're all standing with you. Keeping our residents safe from violence is one of the gravest responsibilities of a city. And just this year, that's harder than ever. As Councilmember Tyson just laid out statistics, those statistics are very real. They're on the ground. They are happening in our city every day. This year's unlike anything I've ever lived through. I think probably anything any of us have ever lived through. And it's placed enormous new challenges on that grave responsibility of a city to keep our residents safe, to keep your son safe, Ms. Hook. So I appreciate this opportunity to talk about the multifaceted challenges. I am really privileged to be joined by Pastor Julius Lancaster. So I do want to take a brief moment to introduce the pastor and hear from him. Pastor, I saw you with your wife filming a video not long ago, and I can say you are married to the smart and charismatic Ashanti. The two of you have 3 beautiful children. I'd like to tell everyone that as lead pastor of I Am Church, Pastor Julius has a heart for people, a desire to spread the love of Jesus, and a love for our city. Pastor Julius enjoys reading, working out, and spending time with family and friends. And he is an advocate, not only for the members of his church, but for all of us, because he is, that's why he was put here, and that's why he spreads the word of Jesus. So I'm happy to introduce you, Pastor Julius Lancaster, to share with us.
Thank you very much. Just a pleasure to be here. Thank you to Council President Hardin and all of the council members and everyone that's here. I just want to take a quick moment to thank Ms. Hook for just being courageous enough to share your story. And, I've never had a child taken away from me, but, my heart goes out to you, and my prayers obviously go out to you and your family as well. So, I just want you to know that you do have a community of people that love you and that are thinking about you and that are praying for you. And, and I hope that, that you find comfort and solace, in the nearest future as possible. And I just want to really address a few things really quick. one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the emotional impact of violence on children. And, you know, a lot of the times we talk about statistics and we talk about numbers, which are very, very important, to know. A lot of the times the actual impact that it has on our youth, I think sometimes goes unnoticed. And what studies show is that youth who witness and are victims of community violence are at risk for increased anxiety and a lot of depression. And also, what we realize is that violence exposure can be interpreted by a child to mean not only that the world is unsafe, but also that the child is unworthy of being kept safe. And I think those are some emotional traumas that children deal with just simply because, they now have to figure out how to keep themselves safe in a world that they thought was supposed to keep them safe. And it causes them to have to tap into some things that just as children, quite frankly, is probably not the best. And so whether, it's related to violence in home or in the community, what we realize is that those attitudes and those measures that children have to take, they'll begin to undermine their school adjustment and their academic achievement, and it'll give them negative self-perceptions and problems. And so, I think just as we, think about how to engage them during these times when violence is at an all-time high here, I think one of the things we have to do is really hear them and hear exactly what they're saying, and not only hear what they're saying, but really hear their actions and really respond with a lot of grace and with as much love as possible, and with as much understanding as possible. And, just really realize that, the youth are really our future. And if we don't get a handle on the plight of them in this particular moment, it could be detrimental for us in the near future. So, I have a heart for the youth and heart for just young adults and young professionals, and just to see some of the things that they're having to endure and go through during this season is really heartbreaking. And, I think one of the best things that we could do is create opportunities to engage them, and hear them, and then take action upon what it is that we hear. So, as we all collectively come together and just offer a lot of our insights and thoughts and perceptions, around it, it's just amazing, to see so many people come to this, and to hear so many people who have great things to say. So, just from my perspective, I think really hearing them and understanding that there is a lot of emotional trauma that they're dealing with, and really tapping into that and leaning into that and taking action upon what it is that we hear, I feel like would be one of the best things that, from my perspective as a pastor, that I could do, in this particular time. And so, I thank all of you guys for just, taking the time to hear what I have to say. And I'm just super excited too, to continue to hear what you guys have to offer as well.
Thank you so much, Pastor. Really appreciate your insights and your advocacy, and your passion for serving the youth. As you said, our kids, our youth, they are our future, and they're really our present too, because they represent ways in which we're all interconnected, and they also represent really important investments we have to make now to protect that future.
Sure.
So I appreciate that so much. I want to talk a little bit about what the city has been doing to focus on kids and families, and then ask you another question, and then soon here turn things over to my colleague, Councilmember Tyson. So during this very challenging time, we are trying to nonetheless support kids and their families, although there are more regulations and more constrictions on that than we've seen in a long time, if ever. So the Columbus Rec and Parks Department runs a violence intervention program called APPS, Applications for Purpose, Pride, and Success. This program includes direct violence intervention work year-round. It also includes a summer jobs program. And then additionally, the city continues to fund violence intervention workers through our community partners as well, Columbus Urban League and Community for New Directions. This work is critical to trying to interrupt the cycle of violence in neighborhoods where it's really hardest to be able to step in between youth and temptation towards violent behavior. And that's why we make those investments. It's a really strong commitment by the city, and we want to be able to continue to do more when it's needed. Over the summer, sort of turning to this year, we, after schools were shut down, and those positive role models, those other adults in kids' lives that just help stimulate kids and provide that important social emotional development. After all of that was shuttered, we provided, starting in June and through the summer, as much recreation programming and summer camps as possible within our rec centers under these new COVID-19 safety guidelines that we developed in concert with public health. We also distributed, recognizing that other organizations do that really important work and had these extra expenses to running their programs. We distributed $2 million to local nonprofit partners to support their programming. And then pivoting to this fall, knowing that for the majority of our kids, in Columbus, there's no hybrid learning. It's all virtual for now. And even hybrid learning will have a lot of limitations when kids can't be in school during the full course of the day and the week like usual. So our rec centers have committed to providing as much programming as possible while also focusing on supporting education needs. They've created active learning sites, is what we're calling them, for students to finish schoolwork at our rec centers, to be able to have a quiet place if needed to get online. And we've also invested in making sure kids have the equipment they need to be dedicated to their schoolwork, and whether that's the Chromebook itself, which we help support at CCS, or the internet connection, a hotspot. So kind of seeing where the city's investments have been over time, and then this summer and this fall, I do want to ask you, Pastor, from your experience, where you see some of the biggest needs for our kids in the realm of what I just spoke about, or far outside of it, if there are things you think the city should continue to look at, rocks we should overturn to help support our kids in their day-to-day lives.
That's a wonderful question. And I'll just speak it from my own experience and my two boys. They're 6 and 8. And my wife and I, we were talking about, a lot of different challenges that the pandemic has presented. And we were talking about it from an adult perspective one day. And this was like back in May or early June. And then we realized that our children were being affected tremendously. I mean, they had literally been out of school for 2 to 3 months at that particular time. And they just had so much time on their hands. One of the things that I think really helped us during that time was MBK had partnered up with We Are Legacy U. And basically what it is it's a youth sports program. And so we were able to get our children involved, just in a lot of the evening sports activities and things of that nature. And they're still involved in that right now. And I think, just a super kudos to the city of Columbus for just really being sensitive to the children during this particular time, and really investing so much into them and what they have going on in this particular season. I think it's really been amazing. You talked about the school programs that the city is offering as well. I believe there's another avenue too called LEC's Learning Extension Centers. For the children, during this particular time when it's going to be mostly virtual learning and potentially, a mixed use, in the near future here, and just some opportunities for them to have the support they need for the parents, who are, dealing with, having to go to work and not being able to work from home and things of that nature. So, I really see just a super intensive focus on the children in this time. And I think it's great. And so, I wouldn't change anything that, the city is doing, honestly, just because, we've never been in a pandemic before. No one. Like, we're all new to this. And, I've never pastored in a pandemic. Children have never been in a pandemic. I mean, the city of Columbus, most people who are in those types of positions, we've never seen this before. And so, we're really doing the absolute best that we can with, pertaining to the situation. So, I think we're doing great because I don't have anything to judge it by.
That's right. There's no measuring stick.
So in my opinion, I think we're doing an amazing job. And, obviously, the room for improvement is always the biggest room in the house. And we could always go back in hindsight and look and see what could have been done better and all of that. Like, we can do all day long, but just taking into account the situation and what is being introduced and what is being offered, I feel like the city is doing great with focusing their time, energy, and efforts on the future, but also being present right now. So I'm totally all involved. I'm all in.
Well, thank you, Pastor. I'm writing that line down too. The room for improvement is always the biggest room in the house.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the Pastor Lancaster original or if you got that somewhere, but I really like it.
I stole it.
Oh, okay. Well, the best lines are stolen, right? The best writers steal outright, I think is how the saying goes. So thank you for being here and for talking not just as a pastor, but as a parent too, because that's really critical right now. With that, I will thank you and I will turn it to my colleague, Council Member Priscilla Tyson.
Thank you, Councilmember Liz Brown. And I have the honor and privilege of introducing Marion Stuckey. Marion Stuckey is first of all, before I introduce Marion, I too just want to make sure I'm saying, give my condolences to Ms. Hook, and also the condolences to other families who certainly lost loved ones based due to violence in our communities and also due to COVID. So again, you're in my thoughts and prayers, and I'm hopeful that we can begin to heal our community and move forward. And but again, we'll continue to be prayerful for you and your family. I will now introduce Marion Stuckey, who is a licensed independent social worker with supervisory status with over 10 years of experience in working in the mental health and wellness field. Currently, Marion works for Columbus Public Health as a section chief of the Neighborhood Services section with the focus of sharing resources with the community and addressing trauma and stigma. Working within communities of color is a passion for Marion, as the unique needs, challenges, and opportunities experienced must be thoroughly considered for effective change and empowerment to take place. Marion leads the Columbus Care Coalition, Community Action, Resilience, and Empowerment, which has a focus of addressing trauma, creating resilient communities, and providing wellness and increased sensitivity to mental wellness. And with that, I will introduce to you Marion Stuckey.
Thank you, Councilmember Tyson. Thank you, Council President Hardin and council members. I'd also just like to also acknowledge Cook as well. Our hearts go out to you and your family, as well as other families that have also experienced such a horrible loss. So my heart goes out to you. I want to speak for a minute about just the compounded stress that's been discussed on the call so far, but I just would like to uplift that I think we're at a time where the community is experiencing stress from so many different sources. The pandemic, civil unrest, seeing images of loss on TV, household challenges, in addition to just being a teenager and normative challenges of growing up. I just would like to speak to that sense of overwhelming loss and grief that I think families are experiencing today. I believe that families are overwhelmed and just really trying to cope in whatever ways that they can. And I also recognize from my experience in trauma that sometimes coping can be positive, and on other occasions it can be a negative experience and doesn't always lead to the healthy choices. So at the CARE Coalition, we're doing a lot of work around helping families and children after a violent loss. So we've recently expanded beyond the violent crime review areas of contacting all families after a violent loss. And so generally what that means is we're providing grief gift baskets to provide coping and resources. We help with providing support around funerals, as well as getting folks connected to victims of crime as needed as well. We're also constantly building our network. We have many care partners that are with us and that we can make referrals to. We know part of the battle is to be able to effectively connect people with resources when they're ready to receive support. We're working diligently to increase our network and make sure that we have partners that have capacity to help with grief counseling and resources and mental health support. We are also actively developing programming to proactively address trauma. We're working with Rec and Parks and City of Columbus partners on the VOICE program, which stands for Violence Outreach Intervention Community Engagement, which will be a partnership with Grant Hospital to provide bedside intervention after someone has a shooting injury. And so we know that's a critical time to offer choice and to provide therapeutic interventions. And just some support for change. We also are working really hard on groups for trauma, as well as innovative therapeutic techniques. We have something called superhero therapy, for example, that works to connect young people with just pop culture and just finding different ways to resonate with our community. I'll also add that CARE is also offering free education to help everyone understand the impact of trauma from a neurological standpoint. And also ways that we can be resilient. We also don't want to forget that part, that sometimes in our darkest moments that, we can also find resilience in those times. I think that it's important to uplift the importance of relationship building. That's really our tried and true method. When we're going out, we're really trying to build relationships and to be a support, even if it's not in the moment, in the future. And that's what we found has been really important for some of the families that we're connecting with is in the moment, there's a lot going on, but we can also follow up later when it's a better time for support because we know in the moment there's so much happening. We also think that there's a strong need for everyone to really believe in healing and that change is possible. I know sometimes it can appear difficult or it's not going to happen, but it is ultimately possible. People are resilient and can grow and change all the time. I think it's also important to just really acknowledge that trauma is all around us. And we each have a unique perspective on what that means, but it's something that affects all of us in different ways, and we grow and cope in different ways too. So I think sometimes we don't acknowledge that enough, but it's definitely something that's affecting us in our decision making. We often say at the coalition, it's not what's wrong with a person, but it's what happened to them. And subsequently, what did they do to survive? And sometimes survival skills are things that are not healthy, but we hope to interact with folks to change that. I conclude by saying we know that there's a lot of pain and hurt right now. It includes things that are happening both locally and nationally. And we're all impacted by those things tremendously. But it is possible to again, find ways through that. As Pastor Lancaster mentioned, there are mental health implications, and many times this can look like post-traumatic stress when you're not feeling safe in your own community. We often liken that to being in a war zone, but sometimes that happens right here in our community. I think hopelessness is another warning sign, and anger, wondering if change is possible. But I'm here to say that resilience is possible. I've seen it in my career. I've seen it in the community, and coming together and building relationships is really what makes that happen, and being able to support each other during times that are difficult. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marianne. And the question I will ask is certainly, as you just stated, the times in which we're in right now, do you feel that you have all the resources that you need to be able to support our communities? And I will also add that I'm excited about that you have, since the CARE Coalition begun, the things you stated today, certainly you have added more programs to help our families. But you could answer that question, that would be, and also how could individuals contact you, even though I know you're going into the community once there is once trauma has affected a community. But how could, your intervention is to go out and to work with the CPD, but how could a family contact you if they've certainly had experienced any of these traumas?
Yes, absolutely. So I think to answer your question in terms of how people can connect with us, we have monthly coalition meetings. People can connect to us through our website, which is columbus.gov/care. We also have a phone line that we could be reached at, and that's 645-6248. Anyone's welcome to join us. We have different work groups that are available for membership and for involvement. And I would say our biggest need is continued capacity to support. From a mental health standpoint, there's always a greater need for additional services and for a therapist of color to support and that look like those that they're serving. I think that's always going to be something that we need. But I think ultimately, just continued capacity to support the community and therapeutic programming is always necessary, especially when there's influxes and folks that need services. So I would say that's the biggest need, but we have great partners that we're working with. We're working to make streamlined referrals. We were able to work with one partner to just really quickly get someone in, and that's invaluable in that time of need. So we're really working through those systemic challenges and trying to make sure that we can get people where they need to be. But that's ultimately what I would say to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Marion. And I'm glad that we have incorporated information about trauma in today's hearing. And the Commission on Black Girls, which I started a couple of years ago, released its quality of life report on Black girls in Central Ohio at the end of July. We understand the involvement in the criminal justice system is in many times related to the trauma that a person experiences, and there's also racial and gender inequities that we should consider. While the Commission on Black Girls report highlights many positive experiences of Black girls, it also sheds light on facts such as Black girls between the ages of 11 and 22 are twice as more likely to be victims of a crime than white girls in the same group. Black youth are 3 times more likely to be reported of child abuse and neglect. Black girls 11 to 18 represent 38% of the population being served by Franklin County Children's Services. And then information provided to the Commission indicated that at-risk factors for Black girls could include research which suggests that Black girls are slowly introduced to the criminal justice system by disciplinary policies throughout society, including schools, that harshly punish girls based on stereotypes about Black femininity. Research shows that even when Black girls are referred to school administrators for identical infractions as their non-Black peers, they are punished more harshly due to implicit racial biases. More than 1 in 10 Black girls have been suspended compared to only 2% of white girls. Black students make up 16% of enrollment, but accounts for 42% of multiple suspensions. And of the 422 Black girls ages 11 to 22 that were surveyed, 40% had received, the respondents received out-of-school suspension. Nationwide Children's Hospital informed the Commission that 1 in 3 Black children have experienced 2 to 8 adverse childhood experiences, compared to 1 in 5 white children. We understand the more ACEs a child experiences, the more likely she is to be at risk for a range of negative outcomes. There's additional data that I could certainly highlight. For example, Judge Gill, who's one of our commissioners, will be presenting momentarily, and she shared data on the Ohio Behavioral Health and Juvenile Justice Initiative. I know information Judge Gill will present today will further help us understand what community members are experiencing in relation to our criminal justice system. In closing, we know that what is happening in our community is impacted by a multitude of factors. The work that we have been doing with the Commission on Black Girls suggests that we need to take a deeper look at trauma and treating individuals and communities. Further, race and gender bias may not only lead to harsher punishments, but also a traumatic experience when compounded with other factors may influence people to engage in crime or unsafe behaviors. And with that, I will now turn it back over to President Hardin.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Tyson, to President Pro Tem, to Pastor Julius, and to Ms. Marion Stuckey. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing, Marion, with the CARE Coalition and hearing about the Voices group. That is the work that folks talk about when we think about reimagining public safety and keeping us all safe. So thank you so much. At this time, I would like to turn the floor over to Councilmember Rob Dorans, who chairs our Neighborhoods Committee. He'll be chatting with Area Commissioner Ms. Quay Barnes and Violence Intervention Specialist Sean Stevenson about how to view this problem through a neighborhoods perspective. Councilmember Dorans.
Thank you, Council President Hardin. Before I get started, along with my colleagues, I want to extend my deepest condolences to Ms. Hook and her family, and certainly all the families in our community that have been touched by violence here over the past few months. I know my heart breaks for these families, and really appreciate Ms. Hooks for being with us tonight to bravely share her story and to help us confront this problem head on. Really appreciate her being here tonight. Next, I'd like to introduce Sean Stevenson. Sean was born in New York and raised in foster homes in North Carolina, Washington, D.C., and here in Ohio. Having entered the gang world at 13, he began his leadership career by the time he was just 15. And by 21, he was incarcerated. Released at the age of 41, Sean is a man on a mission, realizing that he had to make changes in his life and for his community. After exiting prison, Sean began connecting the dots that would define his journey. Sean became a public speaker, a lecturer, and a teacher, expounding the societal ills that led him to prison. Marching in community events, speaking at schools and community centers, churches, and housing projects, Sean is committed to doing his part to effect change and growth and help stop anyone from following his path. Sean established End the Violence Forever, LLC. His company's mission is to eradicate gang violence and crimes in urban blighted cities of America. Working with individuals, organizations, companies, Sean seeks to educate, motivate youth to combat crime and gang. From my interactions with Sean, his passion for this subject runs incredibly deep. And with that, I'd like to turn the mic over to Sean to talk about this problem from his perspective. Sean?
Thanks. How you doing? I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you all, and I appreciate the conversation that I'm hearing. Some of the things that I've noticed when I'm out in the community talking to the youth and the people that we address certain issues with, they feel as though we moving too slow. They don't see the change that we speak about because it's not happening next day, hours away. You know, they need things to happen today. And I hear about all the things that we have put in place for things after things take place. But what we really need to focus on with these communities and these children and these adults that's out here, they need proactive people in their lives. In order for us to make this work and save our city and our country, we need proactive groups at these tables, these forums, talking and giving y'all a little insight on things that's needed in these communities. I'm sorry for the loss of that sister who lost her son to gun violence, but I see it so often, too much. The last week I was in other cities. I just got back active out here in the community because I've been down with Corona. So that is real. We take so much for granted. A lot of things that need to be addressed, we have to talk to the people who is relative to dealing with these issues. We also need to talk to the people who these issues are affecting. And we can't do that if we're not in the community talking to them directly. So I appreciate everybody coming forth and ready to move forward. And I thank you, Shannon, for the opportunity. And I will sit down and Ms. Tyson and City Council. And Chief, I hope I'll be able to sit with you as well. Because in order to combat any of this stuff, we need to know what these young people need because they're being influenced by major cities. Our city's steady growing and they're steady adopting things of other major cities. And we are taking on things from major cities that we're not prepared to address because we didn't look for this to come. All of us, this is new for everybody. So I thank you, and I'm going to let my partner who's with me out here in these streets talk to and tell you a few things. Ephraim, please.
Again, I'd like to thank you all for having us here today. My name is Ephraim Laidley. Some of you are familiar with me, whether it's through working with former pastor John Boston before he went to Australia in the community some years ago, or working with Sean over the last 5 years. To reiterate what Sean is saying, I would like to say thank you to Shannon Hardin for having us here. Shayla Favors, we worked together before you were on council. Appreciate your presence here today. Lawrence as well. Tim Becker, seen you before, so just thank you guys for all coming on and speaking. In terms of information, information was talked about a lot, but a lot of it was in the reactive, the after the fact. And like Sean said, we have to be proactive. We put a lot of resources in the reactive and the after fact, and you need those. You need that, right? You can't win a game with half a football team. You need all the positions on both sides. But what we have to look at and recognize is if you don't want to do business as usual, you have to look at the fact that some of those resources need to go more into the proactive elements. We also have to have individuals that are not just wanting to do their best, but know what to do so then they can do their best, which is a quote from Edward Stanley. I think everyone on this call wants to do their best. But in order to know what to do, right? My wife's a doctor. She has her PhD in biochemistry, does cancer research. My sister is a physical therapist, doctor in physical therapy. My father's a physical therapist. My mom's a nurse. I can go on and on. I'm a VP in IT and operations business technology. And I would be remiss as a technologist if I were to try to go and speak about physical therapy if I'm trying to find the best. Okay, if you need expert care, I can refer you to people who are experts, but I would not want to have a lineup of 10 physical therapists and you leave it to me to pick the best one. That wouldn't make sense. And Sean has the equivalent of several PhDs in the streets. Sean was born dyslexic before they knew what dyslexia was. He had challenges in foster care. He was abused in foster care. He ran away at 13. He was in the streets by 14. By 15, he was a millionaire. And that's federally documented. It's not hearsay. You can look it up. He was part of a very large U.S. case that involved Noriega as well as, getting into that. But he has a background that a lot of these young people in the streets aspire to. And so to hear someone who's actually been there as a teenager tell them that if I had to do it again, I would do it differently. Not because of the prison time, not because of the money or the lack thereof, but because the mindset and the life that you live overall is not worth it. And if you want to attract sharks, you cannot use shrimp bait. A lot of the programs that we have right now are attracting young men like myself before I became what you see today. I grew up in the poorest city in Ohio. I grew up on Section 8 and all those other things, WIC, food stamps, what you name it. I grew up on it. I grew up around a lot of people. And I've seen a lot of things, but what I understand is I don't have license to operate. Sean does on every side of town. He doesn't have sides. He's always been neutral. When he did the gang summit in 2017, it showed that nationally. So that's the kind of element that we need. And so, again, I'd like to thank you for having us here as a part of this discussion, because this is part of the puzzle piece that has been missing for a while. And some of the conversations we need to have in education will take place offline, not here, because it's not effective that way. And so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for being with us tonight and sharing that. And Sean, I'm glad to hear that you're on the road to recovery. Good to see you. Next, it's my privilege to introduce the chair of Columbus's newest area commission, the Mideast Area Commission, Quay Barnes. Quay has been a resident of Berwyn East community for 35 years. She currently serves as the chair of the newest area commission, the Mideast Area Commission. But before that, she served as president for 3 years of its predecessor, the Mideast Area Collaborative. She also served as president of the Berwyn East Civic Association for 8 years. Quay's personal goals for the MAC is to have all communities within its boundaries to have a civic association and or Block Watch representative. The MAC also developed and supports Main Street Special Improvement District, the only community-initiated CID in Columbus. Quay's been married to her husband, Vernon, for 40 years. They have 2 children. Char, who works for the manager of the youth sports for Columbus Parks and Rec, and their son, Matt Barnes, who I think most folks know from the morning show. She's retired from Columbus City Schools and the Columbus Metropolitan Library and has a master's in public administration degree from the Ohio State University. Community work and service is Quay's passion. Quay Barnes is exactly what I think of when I think of what a neighborhood leader is in our community. With that, I'd love to turn it over to Ms. Barnes to talk a little bit about this issue from a community leader perspective.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Dorns, and thank you, Council President Hardin and other council members for this opportunity to speak to you today. To Ms. Hooks, I have 2 children, and your pain is unimaginable to me, and I ask for God's strength to bless you and your family in this time of hardship. As was read to you, I'm from the Mideast Area Commission. We're made up of 14 very unique neighborhoods of varying degrees of criminal activity. Yet we all support each other, searching for a source to the problem and working towards solutions. We also extend our support to the Far East Commission and the Greater Southeast Commission as we formed an organization called the Greater East Side Coalition. Together, the 3 of us walk lockstep to deal with each other's problems. So what are these concerns? Well, we, along with the rest of the city of Columbus, have seen an uptick in gun violence, petty theft, vandalism, prostitution, drug activity, and drug houses. Most alarming to us, though, is that a good portion of this is committed in broad daylight. And the sun used to be our safety period of time during the day. One incident that comes to my mind is the 3 p.m. neighborhood sidewalk shooting of a dog right next to an elementary school building. While it was reported to the police, there was no report taken, and that person still sits every day on his porch every evening with no apparent consequence for his action. So how do we feel? Some of us are afraid to venture out into our communities and sidewalks, and others of us are angry at these incidents, especially those that come into our community from another community and tends to tear down the perception of where we live. But I'm also happy to say that here on the East Side, most of us are determined to do something about it. We have decided to engage our residents as much as we can feasibly possibly do it. We have scheduled collaborations with the Departments of Neighborhood and Recreations and Parks to have COVID-19 giveaways. Local churches have regular food giveaways. A voter registration drive has been scheduled by the Metropolitan Columbus League of Women Voters. And we're in the process of creating several learning extension centers for our community school students. The MAC neighborhoods have had unity days, which includes prayers for peace from the faith-based organizations. We've also had virtual as well as outdoor social distance civic meetings. We've continued that, and we urge our neighbors to share their information through email, using their security cameras or Nextdoor. And our Main Street SID Special Improvement District has been working with the Southeast Healthcare Center to approach ladies in prostitution to offer alternatives to living a life of prostitution. So lastly, what can you do to help us? Well, first of all, you can make us a pop-up COVID testing site. Now you might think, why? Well, the zip codes of 43227 and 43232 are the highest in infant mortality rates. We also have a high level of minorities and a relatively high level of people over the age of 65 living in our area. The closest testing site is on Taylor Station Road, which is out by Mount Carmel East, or on Parsons Avenue, both of which are sometimes difficult for our residents to get to. You can also help us through the Safe Streets program, the initiative. Currently, Safe Streets it immediately responds to all of our problem areas. When we call them, they come out. We'd like to have them extended year-round, if possible. They are only here in the summertime. The CLO program, the Police Liaison Program, where an officer is dedicated to help make a difference in our Block Watch organizations. These people are critical. If the CLO is dedicated to the neighborhood, they can make a difference in whether that Block Watch is developed fully or languishes with no help at all. We do not want CLOs that are just CLOs 2 years before they retire. That's not helpful. If you're not dedicated to that position, please don't apply. I realize that it The CLO program is selected from those with greater seniority, but if there is a young person of 8 or 9 years that really wants to do it, please give those people to us. Also, code enforcement, they deal with us in vacant buildings and abandoned buildings where a lot of these drug houses are. If we could get more drug enforcement officers out there, we could close those areas. And lastly, city attorney's office. They deal with everything that comes through our area and they take care of it legally. However, they have so many hoops to jump through and it takes so long that sometimes it's frustrating for us. So those are the things that are happening with us. We hope that we're trying to solve a few of our problems, but these are some that you can help us with. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Barnes, for being here and giving us some action items from both council and certainly the city to look at what we can do from our vantage point to help to impact some of these things within your specific community. So thank you, Chair Barnes, for being here and putting those things on our radar. With that, I'd like to turn the mic back over to Council President Hardin.
Thank you so much, Chair Dorns, and thank you, Ms. Quay, and to Sean Stevenson and Ephraim for the work that you guys are doing in our neighborhoods. Hearing from you really does contextualize the conversation and how we're fighting to keep neighborhoods safe. At this point, this is our final segment. We have two brilliant legal minds with us this evening. One is our own, which is Chair Faber, who's chair of our Criminal Justice Committee, and our friend, Judge Elizabeth Gill, who are going to talk about the role of the judiciary in this moment in our cities, in our city. With that, Councilmember Faber.
Thank you, Council President Hardin, and good evening, everyone. To Ms. Hook, words truly cannot express deep sentiment that I would love to convey to you in person right now. The grace and the bravery that you have exhibited this evening is unbelievable. Not even a month, and you have taken time to share your story. And with that, I just want to say thank you for that. We cannot allow his legacy and the legacy of those who we have lost this summer to violence to fall by the wayside. It is incumbent upon us as leaders of the city to act expeditiously and do all that we can to end the violence in our community. And so thank you, Ms. Hook, for being here this evening. I also echo the sentiments of the panelists and other council members this evening that our current times have highlighted so many injustices within our judicial system, and that a large part of the protests we are seeing across the country and right here in Columbus are about fighting for equity and true justice. And these cries for justice are important. It has been nearly 6 months since Breonna Taylor was murdered while sleeping in her home, and justice has yet to be served for her and her family and friends. But today, as we discuss violence in our community, I think it's important that we shed some light on the judicial system that so often has a negative impact on African-American families and youth in our communities. Today's criminal justice system is composed of law enforcement, courts, and corrections. When we focus in on the courts, the primary focus is to try cases, render a verdict, and determine appropriate sentencing. National data tells us that 1 out of every 3 Black boys born today can expect to be sentenced to prison, compared to 1 out of 6 Latino boys and 1 out of 17 white boys. We have to ask ourselves the question around why this inequity exists and what can we do to solve it. I'm happy to present our next guest who will help us frame this conversation in her ongoing effort to improve outcomes for Franklin County's juveniles and families. Judge Gill currently serves as lead judge for the Juvenile Advisory Committee and the Crossover Initiative. She actively participates and contributes to the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative and has personally extended the court's use of restorative justice practices in the Franklin County Juvenile Court by implementing community juvenile restorative circles. In both domestic and juvenile court, she continues to work to improve case flow processes for the timely finalization of all family matters. Prior to her election in 2006, Judge Elizabeth Gill had 18 years of litigation experience. Her practice was limited exclusively to law matters. She also served as a court-appointed guardian ad litem in family court proceedings. Judge Gill, I'll turn it over to you for a few remarks.
Thank you very much, Council Member Favor, Council President Hardin, and to all the council members, thank you for having me here today. I do just want to take a minute to just briefly echo everyone's comments to Mrs. Hook today. You do your son such honor and justice to come, as Council Member Favor said, so bravely. I can't even imagine coming forward so shortly after such a loss. So thank you for that. I want to start today by sort of reminding everyone that what the juvenile court does in our work, just very briefly, and then I'd like to really open it up for questions, because I think sometimes that's a better way to quell out the issues. The juvenile court is statutorily ordered to provide for the care, protection, and mental and physical development of children within our system, to protect the public interest and safety, to hold the offender accountable for the offender's actions, to restore the victim, and to rehabilitate the offender. And that is the focus of our work in our Franklin County Juvenile Court. We strive here to achieve these goals by making data-driven decisions. And our data is very important to us. We look at it all the time. And of course, it is always changing, as in the wake of are the tragedies that we have. All of us at the juvenile court are reeling with the recent increase in violence within our youth and within the community, in particular, the use of gun violation. We have an ongoing process over the past 8 to 9 years where we have engaged and conferred with our community stakeholders. We have a saying at our court that these are all of our children. They are not just the children of our schools. They are not just the children of Franklin County Children's Services. They're not just the children of juvenile court, and they're not just the children of the parents that are trying to raise them. And as part of that, we need the entire community at our table. In the wake of the troubled times, we've sort of doubled down on our communication with the various stakeholders to see what we can do at the juvenile court to help protect our youth and our community from what is happening. And we're taking that data and those conversations and really working to look at each of our decision-making points to make sure that we are following our statutory demand to work towards rehabilitation of a youth, to also protect for the safety of the community. And that's, of course, because we always remember at the court that at the age of 21, those youth walk out of our jurisdiction and back into the community. And so we take our job very responsible that we need to do that. So a couple of our decision-making points that we really need to make. Our first point that we need to make a decision is when a youth is referred to our system for charges. And in order, we must make a decision to hold a youth for purposes of 3 really important reasons: the safety of the community, the safety of the youth, and to assure further court participation. We make those decisions in light of the data point, the 2 data points that I'm always reflecting on. And that is that one night in the detention center impacts a child's likelihood of graduating from high school by 50%. One night. One night in the detention center also increases the likelihood of that youth committing another offense, either in his youth or in her majority, by 50%. And with that there, we really have to be careful of who we decide to hold. And those are scary decisions to make because, again, the safety of the community and the safety of the youth, particularly on what we're looking at. After we also want to make sure we protect the judicial decision-making process, making sure that we're protecting due process for the youth, and making sure that we have good evidence before us. And finally, on a disposition side, when we determine whether a youth is a delinquent or not, we make determinations as to whether that youth must proceed to be held in the Department of Youth, or if they can be referred within our community enrichment services for work on a goals and success plan to do much better. And so just to kind of wind it up, we start from the very beginning. We see if we can divert youth out. We have a robust diversion department that includes misdemeanor services, police-initiated diversion, where we strive to get very low-level offenders the attention and the services they and their family need to try to stop this cycle, all the way to our JASIS, which is our Juvenile Community Enrichment Services, which is, again, based on a positive youth development model that works with the youth and family and engaging their family with very specified goals and success plans to help those youth get through that. All of this is with the knowledge and the information that we've received with respect to the effect of trauma on adolescent brain development, the mental health issues, and that most of our youth enter our system with some diagnosis of mental health. Particularly, as Councilman Tyson said, the highest percentage of our Black girls that enter into our system have diagnosable mental health issues. And these need to be treated much more than the outcome if we're going to get them to be healthy adults that are living in our community. And so with that, I would just open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Judge Gill, for level setting us. In response to the murder of George Floyd earlier this summer, we saw protests stem up not only in Columbus, but all around the country. In response to that, Council wrote out a legislative package around reimagining public safety. Can you talk a little bit about what the courts are doing locally in response to the outcries for criminal justice reform?
So again, we have been working on juvenile justice reform within our county here, and in fact, in the state of Ohio for quite some time under the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative. And that does work to look at every decision point, including making sure that in my case, because I'm a juvenile judge, making sure youth are well represented when they come in, and that we have a menu of services that, again, get to the core of the issues that bring them in there. The other thing that we are very focused on is early intervention. So when the youth first touches our system, if it's as an unruly or the truant, we really are rolling up our sleeves and really trying to work with them and their families to do that. We also are looking at lots of creative partnerships. We try to partner with the faith-based community to get mentors and community service and other kind of support systems in the project. We are excited about a recent development where we're going to partner with Franklin County Jobs and Family Services for Family Stabilization Unit, which we think it really gets to the heart of the issue with respect to it. One of the greatest work that we have here speaks directly to what you spoke of early, and that is the incredible racial and ethnic disparities within our system, just as along the whole justice system parallel. And we really look at the data to see what specialized programs and culturally appropriate programs are going to work and help, particularly youth of color, and frankly, particularly Black boys of color, because they're the ones that are most affected. The little statistic that I give out, and you probably know this better than I, but when we say that the minority community in Franklin County and Columbus is about 27%, maybe 27, 28%, around there. We have last year about 78 to 80% of our youth that were found delinquent were Black boys. And in our detention center alone, that statistic, that data is much higher. I'm pretty sure that as of today, when I looked at it, it was about 95% that we're holding. And we're very concerned about reacting in these times when it is so scary and it is so upsetting to all of us on a personal and professional basis on what we face, that we don't overreact to a point that we tend towards the 1990s over incarceration of Black boys and Black men in a response to this horrible violent epidemic that's happening.
Thank you, Judge. What actions can our legislative body take to support criminal justice reform here in Columbus and in Franklin County?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. So I think that what really would be super supportive for us is really taking a look at what issues bring our youth into our courts. And so much of it comes out of the needs of family stabilization. If I have to be really honest with respect to it, I mean, I think I'll give you the greatest example that I can give that tells me that we need something else other than punishment to face these kind of issues. I have young men and young women who have faced being transferred to adult. They've received a charge that risks them being transferred to adult court for prosecution. All right. And there's not taking up your time today, but a decision has to be made whether they're going to be prosecuted in adult court or if we're going to keep them in juvenile court. And, I'm sorry?
No, I just said bound it over. That's
okay. All right. And yes, thank you. Bind over. Yes. And so these youth, I've kept them in the juvenile system, and as part of their whole plan, they are not allowed to carry guns. And then they get caught with carrying a gun under disability, and they immediately get filed on again to be bound over again to the adult system as a result of that. And I will ask them, I will say to them, why would you risk this? We were here, we just went through this process. And they just look at me and they say, because everyone has guns. And so that tells me that the punishment isn't going to stop them. The threat of punishment, the threat of incarceration is not going to stop this. It's dealing with the family stabilization. So any kind of legislation, any kind of assistance that the city can do for our families and our communities, I believe helps the most with respect to our youth.
And I think your response just teed up perfectly for my next question. What are the biggest challenges that you're seeing as families enter your courtroom? So you highlighted the need for efforts around family stabilization, but what are the other issues that you could point to that perhaps we might be able to lean in further on?
I would say my first reaction and the number one thing is access to mental health care. I think that for adolescents and families is an incredibly important piece that we need to have. And it's such a struggle for families, as I know everyone on this conversation knows. That's the number one thing. Certainly, just the general stabilization of access to food, access to medical care. These are all the basic things that these families really need. But the mental health piece is incredibly important. And then I would really love if someone can help me engage these families further in the investment of their children once they have come into our system. We have a tremendously difficult time to engage parents who I think are just struggling so much themselves to survive and to get from morning to night, and that it's hard to engage them without them just saying, here, you fix her. It's not, we can't do that. And that's a tremendous issue that we struggle with. Probably really our number one issue outside of mental health services that we're always struggling to get. Because the other thing is that delay, if you think about for everyone that has children, delay in addressing whatever their behavior is a problem with a child. Because so if a child does something, touches a stove today, and you circle back 90 days later and say, this is why you don't do this and this is where you don't do it, they can't connect those two together. And so if I by the time I get through a case and get a youth appointed good counsel and we get through it and we figure that out, we could be 9 months away. And then we'd be on a list for mental health treatment for another 60, 90 days. There's a lot of time. There's a lot of times for more acting out. There's a lot of time for more family dysfunction. And there's a lot of time that we are going to lose that youth in that time.
Well, Judge, you and I could go on hours having in-depth conversation about this topic, and you truly have provided further insight and also confirmed what I believe the spirit of what this council has taken on around reimagining public safety and what that looks like. So thank you for your candor and your insight this evening. And with that, I will turn it back over to Council President Hardin.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our participants. In closing, I think hopefully this was a productive conversation for our community, as I think there were many resources. I took some notes throughout the conversation. One of the first things I wrote down was see something, say something. We have to report crimes when we know of it so that we can solve these crimes so that our families can have closure. The CARE Coalition, make sure to reach out to the CARE Coalition, columbus.gov/care, to get more information on how you can engage. We heard information about the Black Girls Commission and the work that they are doing and continue to do for our young girls. In particular, Sean Stevenson and the community care, community interventionists that are out on the streets, specifically creating that proximity with our young people that need it is critically important. We heard about the juvenile court system. I can't tell you over the last couple of weeks how many people just said, well, you just have to lock them up and hold them there longer. I've told people we're beyond the easy answers as it pertains to the violence in our community. And I think Judge Gill walking through what she just did kind of gives us some contextualizes how it's not that easy. And there's so many other things. And that I think the beautiful thing that Judge Gill said, that these are our children. And so don't do the easy thing and just think that they're the juvenile justice system's children. They're all of our children, which means we all have a responsibility. And then to Ms. Hook, you stood in the gap tonight for other mothers and families. You were their voice. You were their strength. And I think that you broke through to our Columbus community. And I hope that you feel the positive energy and the love and the prayers that we're sending your way to your family. And we will continue to be here and continue to be a resource for you. With that, I just want, yes, ma'am. Seriously, yes, we really do appreciate you. With that, I want to thank everybody for participating. I want to thank my colleagues for being here tonight. And we look forward to seeing everyone as council comes back into session on Monday, September 14th. We certainly have a lot of work to do. Thank you and have a great evening.